Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm. We're social awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all around nerds convene, talk, and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the Nerdy Occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hello, everyone. Sooner or later, we will get so we can do that without flubbing it. But apparently, today is not that day.
I'm tired. And I am your host. Last time I want to be the Brainstorm Pop Culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I'm doing mostly okay. I am also tired. This was a very long week.
So kind of a stacked week with stuff.
Mm-hmm. Between the old stuff we still haven't finished yet, and the new stuff, it ended up filling up pretty significantly.
Give me 1 sec when I get the article up and running.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, firstly, we're gonna finish the Alan Moore comic book resources article, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Unsurprisingly, CBR is, as usual, cancer.
Okay. Okay. Go. Screen. Yeah, it was Alan. I think Alan Moore was right about superheroes article, and we're just gonna, because I stopped right as we're just going to go into another part of the article.
Okay, perfect.
Unless you want me to read a little bit before.
No. If you stopped right before a new heading, that's a perfect place to jump back in.
Okay. Moore ignores how the title of this section here is Moore ignores how works like his own have helped fight against superheroes' inherent fascism. God damn it.
There is no such thing. And even if there were such a thing, Alan Moore and company don't deviate from the formula that much. So you are doubly wrong on at least 2 vectors here. Moving on.
Right. Moore is correct that superheroes can be a road to fascism. The desire for a strong person to tell everyone what to do and to fix the problems of society is near inescapable. Okay,
Go ahead. Sorry.
That is completely wrong. Unequivocally.
That's why the facepalm. I think I might have mentioned this last week, but I will go through the rationale again for the sake of completeness. If that were true, there would be no comic book villains. There would be no supervillains if power was the main signifier of right or good. If comic books were might makes right in a pseudo-fascist sense, as you seem to be implying, there would be no villains, because there would be no people who use power incorrectly in those stories. But as we all know, and by all, I mean literally all, everyone who's ever seen so much as a superhero cartoon knows that typically, in the name of, fighting the heroes, there are villains who both philosophically oppose them and oppose them with abilities of their own, very often with very similar powers to that of the hero in question. And that's the other thing. In a world where there are characters, both good and evil, who have similar sets of powers, like, for example, Black Adam and what used to be referred to as Captain Marvel back when things were sane and is now referred to as Shazam because stupid, both Black Adam and Captain Marvel have the same set of powers. Therefore, there is no mechanical difference between their use of power. Ergo, the difference that you should be able to draw, and by should I mean literally anyone with 2 brain cells, like children could figure this out for you. In a world where 2 characters have very similar power sets, the main distinction between the 2 of them is the moral use to which they put that power. That's why Black Adam is typically a villain, and Captain Marvel / Shazam is typically a hero. Thus, it's a quintessential example of why exactly you're wrong. Because if power was considered good by its very nature by superhero comics, there would be no villains with similar power sets to the hero, or indeed any form of power by itself. Because if comic books were approaching this from a pseudo-Nietzschean quasi-fascist sense, as you seem to be implying, the only people who would be considered villainous would be people without power of any kind. If power is the definition of good, as per your argument, then there would be no bad people with powers. And there very much are. In many vectors, that's the entire goddamn point. Like, the fundamental basis of the genre is heroes confronting villains and vice versa. So, either you need to explain to me why, if power is synonymous with right or moral virtue in superhero comics, where there's so many people with power that use that power incorrectly or morally wrongly. Or you can come to the terms with the fact that you are fundamentally wrong, and both you and Alan Moore have been brain-rotted by the overuse of the term fascism that you probably can't even fucking define. Moving on.
Just look at the current political situation of the United States, and fiction has helped that along. Fiction is a wild landscape of creativity, yet it's also a form of societal control. Feed people the stories of strong leaders fighting against the darkness of the world, or what the audience perceives as the darkness, and you'll get people who will often look to fascism for a solution. What the fuck are you on about?
What they're on about is they don't know any other political system or moral system which sees power as a possibly good thing. They assume that any use of individualistic power must at least be quasi-fascist. And it isn't. And again, your premise seems to be that superhero comics preach might makes right, and that's what makes them quasi-fascist. But one, superhero comics don't do that. It's in fact the other way around. Typically. Usually what happens is someone who demonstrates, either through their own nature or through redemption arcs, that they are worthy of power, gain access to that power, and use that power against other people with power who use their power incorrectly. Which again, if superhero comics were might makes right, or were preaching might makes right, there would be no comic book villains. Because there would be no such thing in the reader's mind as someone who uses their power incorrectly. But there very much is a critical distinction between people who use their power correctly and people who use their power incorrectly. Therefore, even your straw man point is null. But as it happens, your straw man point is also a synonym of you being politically fucked in the head, because superhero comics do not preach might makes right, and even if they did, fascism is not the only political system which features the power of the individual as a major component thereof. Monarchism does that. Liberalism does that. Most forms of Western conservatism, which themselves are based on classical liberalism, also does that, etc. Like, you act as if no one before fascists ever believed in the power or potential virtues of an individual. And yeah, no, that is the most bullshit I've ever heard. Fascism does not have a monopoly on the belief of the power of the individual. And the fact that you think it does, or that you think every system which contains that axiom is also therefore quasi-fascist, is a sign of just how upside down your political schema happens to be. Moving on.
Okay. However, Moore ignores the power of his own work. Take Miracle Man. The story ends with superheroes taking control of the world and forcing a perfect world on the people of Earth. This world is objectively good for people, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a world that is bound by the will of its leader. Moore shows readers the utopia that Miracle Man created, but there's always the idea that this is wrong. It's taken away human destiny. You motherfuckers want the same thing.
Yeah, because you don't believe that individuals should be a thing. You don't believe that you should have the right or freedom to disassociate once you have associated. Because that's the thing. Even if I'm even if I assume your description of this story is correct, which, frankly, given how wrong you've been about everything else you've talked about in this article, I'm very far from allowing. But even if I assumed that your description here was accurate, which it probably isn't, I'm going to hazard a guess and say that you think that someone who is a reactionary or a fascist sympathizer, or hell, probably even a capitalist, because according to large swaths of Antifa types, capitalism is just softcore fascism. You would think of someone being a subversive or a reactionary within your preferred system as someone who needed to be re-educated, wouldn't you? And yet, Alan Moore, probably thinking very much the same type of stupid bullshit you're thinking, assumes that any system where powerful individuals exist is necessarily dystopian and authoritarian, even if it isn't and it works. Which, just know, like, I agree. The problem with such a system as the one you're describing here is that it is unilateral. But that has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that it's powerful people enforcing it. It has to do with the fact that human societies function best under at least soft pluralism. But you don't want there to be pluralism, because if you wanted there to be pluralism, you would be willing to entertain other philosophical frameworks than your own. And a large percentage of why you are this head fucked, this politically warped, as to believe this about superhero comics, or to agree with Alan Moore about superhero comics. A large part of the reason why you are this head fucked is because you can't cope with the idea that there are other philosophical frameworks than your own that deserve to coexist alongside your own. And that is fundamentally fucked. Moving on.
However, more. Moore's work has always been like this, intelligent and political, fighting against ideas that poison the mind of the audience. There's an antidote for the inherent fascism of superheroes, and it comes from creators as passionate as Moore himself, who dare to show that superheroes can be more.
That's not unique to Alan Moore, and it well predates Alan Moore since at least the 1950s, because the whole reason Frederick Wertham and company got whiny and moralistic about superhero comics was they were becoming more dark and or realistic and or complex in an actual meaningful sense. And Alan Moore didn't like that because he thought it would brainwash kids, ironically insisting that superhero comics in the Silver Age basically be used as a mechanism to brainwash kids with, like, normie morality. And because Frederick Wertham overstepped his bounds so thoroughly, most of the 80s was spent attempting to undo a lot of the damage that he and his company did. But as we just demonstrated here, much of this argument, which does come from people like Alan Moore, believes things about superheroes that are not now, nor were they ever, true. And it's staggering to me just how pig ignorant you are of this genre that you're supposed to be informed enough about to have an entire website devoted to it. And again, the easiest way to disprove your theory here is, simply put, if power was the thing that makes people right in superhero comics, there would be no such thing as comic book villains, because there would be no such concept as people using power wrong. And there very much is, ergo superheroes are not fascist. Moving on.
Alright. Yep. That was the end of that article.
After all that bullshit, they ended that abruptly? What the hell?
Alright, here's an... Alright, yeah. Next article. PC Gamer originally, written by Justin Wagner. Not sure when it's supposed to have been. But yeah. The United Nations asked Helldivers 2 studio Arrowhead if it'd give a talk on psychological manipulation. Could we brainwash an entire community to fight for a fascist state? We'll be okay with that? Turns out, yeah.
It once again stuns me how little understanding of the concept of fascism these people actually have. I know for a fact none of these people have read Giovanni Gentile or Benito Mussolini or Francisco Franco, or they probably have read Mein Kampf, because most of our middle school years in this country, we are basically beaten over the head with how bad the Nazis were. And I'm not saying they weren't, but like most of my memories of middle school are the, like, cross-disciplinary classes on how bad the Nazis were. And yet we hardly ever hear hide nor hair of how bad the communists were in Russia, or the other fascists were in places like Spain and or Italy. But, don't let me convince you actually need to know what the definition of a word is before you're allowed to use it ad nauseum, but okay. Moving on.
I wasn't taught anything about that. Honestly,
You guys didn't have Holocaust guilt porn month?
Well, no, we learned like some things, like stories and stuff, but is that one like autobiography from that child?
Anne Frank, The Diary of Anne Frank.
No, other one that was like in Auschwitz.
The Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
No, that was middle school. High school. I remember a little bit more. Uh, what was his name? Never knew about Minecraft. Minecraft.
American educational system, folks. But gripes about the American educational system being a bunch of cunts aside, yeah, I highly doubt that most of the people who use fascism as though it's their favorite word have any conception whatsoever as to what fascists actually believed or how they acted in relation to those beliefs. But we will get into that as the article goes moving forward.
Subheader was players eagerness in the fight for Super Earth begs the question: are we the baddies? You are aware that it's satire, motherfuckers.
Yeah, they just don't know what they're satirizing. They think they're satirizing fascism and that people who side with them or side with the Super Earth in Helldivers must be sympathetic to fascism. But Helldivers and by extension Starship Troopers, because it's very obviously a parody of Starship Troopers as well, could vaguely be referred to as fascist in like the most broad colloquial definition, maybe, which most people's like innate like colloquial definition appears to be like authoritarian militarism. But even then, the people who side with Super Earth in Helldivers or side with um Terran Federation in Starship Troopers aren't siding with the idea of an authoritarian military state. They're siding with humans against aliens, or uh, in Helldivers' case, aliens and robots. And only the people who assume that any preference for the self or the homestead at all is fascist. Only the people who think that standing in your own defense full stop is definitionally fascist would actually believe that fighting against um, alien bugs and robots on humanity's behalf is necessarily fascist. I agree with you in the sense that Super Earth and the Terran Federation sound like absolutely terrible systems to exist within. And I do understand the revulsion a lot of people have for authoritarian militarism, even though that's not strictly speaking what the definition of fascism is. It's the like inborn colloquial definition people seem to have. I agree with you that I would not want to live in the Terran Federation or in Super Earth. And no way in all the hells would you ever catch me joining the military under most circumstances. At least not human ones. I'm leaving that proviso open because, my queen and all. But that's neither here nor there. I wouldn't want to live in the Terran Federation or on Super Earth. But if I found myself in a world where bugs wanted to genocide our entire species, I would at least be mostly neutral on the topic, not full on the humans or the baddies, which seems to be the default assumption among the Neo-Hegelian set. because neo-Hegelianism ruins everything it touches. And it stuns me that the people who made Helldivers seem to have no understanding of what made Helldivers successful or likable or engaging whatsoever. Like, you can have philosophical disagreements with your player base, I suppose, but you tried to make a fascism simulator and you don't seem to understand what the word fascism means or has ever meant. Moving on.
Dude.
Yeah.
I think you have a completely backwards view of this.
What?
Yeah, I think you got it wrong. Arrowhead isn't. They're literally satirizing like Starship Troopers, Warhammer, Halo, all that shit. It's.
Yeah, but according to them, as per the title, they think they made a fascism simulator when they didn't.
No, it's not them. It's the United fucking Nations.
Yeah, because did you read the you read the words, but I don't think you understood it. That quote is the developers saying that they did that because they were asked to talk at the United Nations, and apparently they think they made a fascism simulator. They didn't, because that's not what that word means, but they think they did.
I think they were.
They weren't quoting the UN. That quote comes from the people who made Helldivers at the behest of the UN, but that quote comes from the creators, apparently. Moving forward.
Yeah, because not even in the article yet, dude.
Yeah.
If you played Helldivers 2 for more than about 15 seconds, you're probably well acquainted with the game's right sense of humor. Let's start some troopers. The game sees players dying in droves as disposable soldiers in the name of theoretical democratic utopia. Not that they'd ever see it, as they're all too busy getting torn apart by giant bugs and landing supply drops on each other's heads. In a talk at 2025's Game Developers Conference titled Helldivers 2 Capturing Lightning in a Bottle, Arrowhead CEO Johan Pjelsted reiterated for anyone out of the loop that yes, the game is meant to be ironic, and the fight for Super Earth was always meant to paint players as dispensable henchmen. What is Helldivers 2 fundamentally? It would probably be fun to play a co-op action shooter where you're put in the shoes of the evil side grunts of pop culture. How many seconds would you be able to survive?
Yeah, they think the players are evil for siding with humanity against the bugs and the robots. That's basically what he just said.
I was getting the sense because, well, no, the Helldivers are also trying to like conquer the universe too. There are no good guys in that. Like, it's like with Warhammer, really.
Right, but the creatives want the player base to have empathy for the robots and the bugs.
No.
Against humanity.
No, that's not at all. Everyone sucks. There's no empathy.
Right, but you and I know that. The people who created it apparently don't know that.
I think that was their intention.
Well, we'll keep reading, but I think you're being overly charitable to them, my friend.
And you are a bitter cynic. So this is not new news.
The quote was in the headline. And the quote we just read from the CEO does not dispute the quote that was in the headline.
Again, I think it's just because I don't often try to see things from a political standpoint because I don't give a shit about politics. And
that's fair enough. But unfortunately, we live in a world where the creators of Helldivers do see things from a political perspective.
I just don't.
They shouldn't. It's stupid, but they're doing it.
I'm not seeing it. Again, that could be just me.
Again, I refer you to the quote in the title and then the quote we just read from the CEO. But I'm sure we'll see more evidence as the article goes on.
And it can be really annoying when you're trying to be like very much a smarmy asshole, right?
I am aware, but I think, like I said, I think you might be being way too charitable to them here.
Of course, you might start to wonder how fun it'll actually be once you consider the implications of dressing players up in fascist uniforms and calling them to arms under the banner of an imperial state to die, and die again in the name of democracy. It's the point. It's a fucking game.
Also, by the way, the quote-unquote fascist side that you guys think you're satirizing here aren't the ones who say we need to protect our democracy and then ban people from voting or creating situations where people don't have the option of voting. Not to be overly political, but at the moment, it's the left-wing side of the US political spectrum that will rant and rave absolutely lyrical about our democracy and then prevent people from engaging in things like primaries and so on. Moving on.
We asked ourselves, could we brainwash an entire community to fight for a fascist state? Would they be okay with that? And turns out, yeah, actually, Pilsett said in his talk.
Told you so.
I'm big enough to admit when I'm wrong, but also you don't have to be an asshole about it.
I apologize. Honestly, it came out that way because I was surprised that you didn't see it. In retrospect, that was me maybe assuming you'd see more than you usually do. But that was mostly why I think it came out dickish, was because I was surprised that you didn't see it.
Dude, I have said this so many times. I never see this kind of shit because I do not care enough to know about it.
Fair enough. Moving on.
All right. Melee Helldivers 2 continues its streak of turning missteps into game lore. After major feature was paused for 24 hours, Superhead says nothing out of the ordinary has happened. Arrowhead CEO got a call from PlayStation where he said players could save their money and wait to buy Helldivers 2 until the servers were fixed. They asked me what the fuck I'm smoking. But it wasn't just players whose heads were turned by Helldivers' sardonic spin on Imperial warfare. They also garnered the attention of a little organization you might have heard of before called the United Nations.
And I'm sorry, but the fact that the U-fucking-N takes politically brain-rotted game developers like this more seriously than it takes people who vote the quote-unquote wrong way says a lot about just how out of touch the institutions that govern our world actually are. Moving on.
Actually, we got a message from the UN asking if we want to talk in some form about psychological defense against manipulation. Added Pillisted, I think. I don't know. This might all sound like the game is getting a little too real, but he said the key wasn't finding the right tone and using the imagery in an almost educational way. We do it all in fun and good spirits, and we actually try to get people to recognize the science of what is a totalitarian state. If you start wearing the same uniform as everybody else and do salutes constantly, you might be in a totalitarian regime.
This has kind of the same problem that the Alan Moore article did. You do realize that fascists aren't the only set of people who have their military wear uniforms, right? Maybe this is me reading too much into this. That is entirely possible, but it sounds like they're making the same mistake the previous article did by assuming that only fascists have their militaries wear uniforms, which is just kind of silly. Uniforms are necessary on the battlefield so that you can identify which side each combatant is on, lest you end up, hurling bullets at your own side by accident or something. Like, this is a necessary feature of warfare, especially in the modern era where weapons can kill dozens of people at once. Like, back in the old days where you actually had, people fighting mostly with swords and mostly engaging in one-on-one combat with each other in those battle formations, you could almost get away with loosening the uniform rules a little bit. But in a world where you have to be able to identify your side and your enemy side from a distance, uniforms become fundamentally necessary. Because we have weapons now that can kill from hundreds of meters away a lot of the time. So it would be a real logistics nightmare if you accidentally threw a grenade at your own side by accident. Moving on.
It's unclear if Arrowhead actually had any further discussions with the UN, but it speaks volumes to the game's far-reaching influence and evocative riffs on fascist propaganda.
Bless you.
Thank you. Nope. Sorry. Games are not unfamiliar with these sorts of discussions, but rarely does one invite them so bluntly. Ugh. Helldivers 2 is not subtle, to be fair.
No, but it's also not really fascism either. Except for maybe in the loosest, most colloquial definition, which is authoritarian militarism. But that is the informal colloquial definition. That's not in any way a descriptive. That's not an accurately descriptive term.
Right.
Again, the most succinct definition of fascism that I'm aware of is Giovanni Gentile's "all things within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state." And you could in theory do that without any militarism at all. If you just doubled and tripled and quadrupled down on bureaucracy, like the movie Brazil, Terry Gilliam's Brazil, where everything is bureaucratized to the point of farce, that could also be a fascist state without any jackboots or militaries whatsoever. Now, as a practical note, most fascist regimes do end up having squadrons of jackboots because people still try to do things that the government or the institution won't like. And after a certain point, the only thing you can do to prevent that is force people to behave themselves or kill them all. But in theory, at least, by Giovanni Gentile's own definition of fascism, you could have fascism by sheer bureaucracy rather than any kind of militarism. Moving on.
Further point home and prevent Helldivers 2 from getting too depressing, Arrowhead pulled on the shiny patriotic aesthetics of the US, the EU, and the UN itself, as well as the mantras of regimes like Nazi Germany and North Korea. It creates pleasing aesthetics, Plested noted, because there's something totalitarian regimes are really good at, pleasing aesthetics.
Just so I am clear what they just said, did they group the US in the same category as North Korea and Russia? Because at risk of sounding too much like an American, that is a false equivalency. The US is not a totalitarian regime. We are occasionally bigger than we ought to be, and we are occasionally meddling in political zeitgeist that we probably shouldn't. But we are not, at least not yet, in any way a totalitarian regime. The only two times in my lifetime where that argument could meaningfully be made was the Bush years post 9/11 and the COVID years. Those are the only two times in my lifetime's memory, and I'm almost 30, where you could argue that America was being an authoritarian regime. But in the case of COVID, especially, everyone was unnecessarily flirting with totalitarianism for the sake of flatten the curve. And I don't see anyone referring to Britain as a totalitarian regime. And Britain locked down much worse than the US did. So either you are calling the US a totalitarian regime when it's not one, or you should be more universalistic with the term totalitarian. Because if the US is totalitarian at its worst moments, there are places in Europe that make even the US under COVID lockdowns seem like a fucking theme park by comparison. And let's not even talk about what Russia and China are currently doing, because frankly they scare me with their fucking weird ass social credit bullshit. But that would also imply that Ukraine aren't currently the good guys in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, or at least they aren't as pure as a lot of the Western media likes to think they are. Anyway, moving on.
Alright, Third Dimension Helldivers have had satirical stormtroopers in every corner of the galaxy, and players have certainly responded to the game's call to arms with eager roleplay, joking, and otherwise. Combine that with Helldivers' 2 novel approach to live service, wherein games developing war constantly finds new ways to seem comically hopeless. And it seems like Arrowhead is better at indoctrinating loyal soldiers than one might expect. Though given Magicka's bewildering Vietnam expansion, maybe we should have all seen this coming.
See, this is the part where these people go fully insane. People's desire to play as Super Earth in Helldivers is not because people are secretly fascist or they can easily be molded into fascists. It's because, on balance, if you show people a human faction and a bug faction and a robot faction, most people will have slightly more empathy for humans on the grounds that they themselves are humans. And the fact that you want to demonize and pathologize that is... or it would be frightening if it weren't so fucking hilarious and stupid. Moving on.
Yep. This is from The Guardian. Been a while since we covered these guys. Video games can't escape their role in radicalizing young men. Rebecca Keith Stewart, published March 24th, 2025.
Short version of my position on this: yes, they can, for they do no such thing. End of my summary opinion. Moving on.
Subheader: those of us who spend our lives gaming can no longer deny knowledge that our online communities are awash with disturbing hate speech and violent rhetoric.
I can deny that all the live long day because, frankly, I don't believe that hate speech is a concept worth entertaining as valid. And as for being problematic, it's called having a fucking sense of humor and being willing to turn your political blinders off occasionally. Moving on.
All right. Sorry, I was yawning.
Yep.
There's a lot of tension on young men and toxic masculinity at the moment. It's about time. The devastating Netflix drama Adolescence about a 13-year-old boy accused of murdering a girl after being radicalized by the online manosphere has drawn attention to the problem through the sheer force of its brilliant writing and a blistering lead role performance from teenager Owen Cooper. I've never heard of this show.
It's a new thing on Netflix. Have you ever watched 13 Reasons Why?
You really asking that?
Yes, I'm really asking that. Have you ever watched 13 Reasons Why?
Don't think about what I'm usually interested in and think about that show.
I'm assuming that you didn't end up watching it.
I did not care to watch it.
Which I mean, fair enough. It was essentially morally scolding porn, like fear porn. But the reason I bring it up is it seems like Adolescence is shaping up to be this year's or this zeitgeist equivalent of what 13 Reasons Why was. For those that don't know about 13 Reasons Why, which includes Brainstormer, so I shall now summarize 13 Reasons Why.
I'm aware of it. I knew about stuff about it. I didn't. It's not my thing.
Yeah. 13 Reasons Why was an extremely heavy-handed series that was trying to beat the viewer over the head with suicide prevention talking points. By using a fictional example, hence the aforementioned 13 Reasons Why. The 13 Reasons Why refer to the 13 Reasons Why the character that we're supposed to have sympathy for killed herself. Adolescence seems like the modern version of that, in the sense that it takes all the insufferable talking points about toxic masculinity and incels and online radicalization and beats the audience summarily over the head with it until they can't feel anything anymore. But long story short, the part of this sentiment I disagree with is that we don't already get way too much focus on the concept of toxic masculinity. If anything, and yes, this is me being a teeny bit men's rightsy here, we need to start reminding young girls that they also can be flawed, and not everything they think is sacrosanct, pure, and gospel by definition. And yet, despite how frequently I hear the phrase toxic masculinity spouted every which way, I've never once heard toxic femininity taken even the tiniest fraction of seriously. So, as far as I'm concerned, society is left with two choices. Either it can acknowledge that both genders have the capacity to be toxic for gendered reasons, or we can stop referring to things as toxic masculinity. Either universalize this standard so it applies to everyone, or stop demonizing men. Those are your two options as far as I'm concerned. Moving on.
All right. What was that? Recently, former England football manager Gareth Southgate gave a speech about the state of boyhood in the UK. Sorry. specifically about how young men lacking moral mentors are turning to gambling and video gaming, thereby disconnecting from society and immersing themselves in predominantly male online communities where misogyny and racism are often rife. Okay, that sounds. To be fair, he is addressing the problem, so good, but you're blaming it on something instead of blaming, oh, I don't know, the motherfuckers that are supposed to help them?
Yeah, because if we're talking about toxic gendered bullshit, I'm gonna bring this up. The American Psychological Association recently updated its guidelines for assisting men and boys with psychological issues, wherein they basically equate the concept of toxic masculinity with a mental disorder, and therefore and I'm oversimplifying this significantly, but the long and the short of it is, according to the APA's current guidelines of how to deal with men and boys with psychological issues, you're supposed to get them to renounce their idea of masculinity because the idea of masculinity is what's causing their psychological issues. Which just fuck that noise entirely. You would not ever, not once, say that young women's biggest problem is they hyperfixate on their femininity to the exclusion of all else, and so we need to get them to renounce their femininity. But somehow it makes sense to the American Psychological Association that the main problem with men and boys who suffer from things like depression and anxiety is they just care about masculinity too much and they need to learn to renounce it. Again, the way I see it, you have two options. You can subject everyone to this bullshit, which would include reminding women that they're not perfect, or you can ease the fuck off of young men, because I can guarantee you that this approach society seems to have of demonizing every time young men don't behave like young women is only making the problem worse if it's doing anything at all. Moving on.
All right. There has been some kickback in the gaming press to the idea that games have provided a less than ideal environment for boys. But even those of us who have played and enjoyed games all of our lives need to face up to the fact that gaming forums, message boards, streaming platforms, and social media groups are always awash. Are awash with disturbing hate speech and violent rhetoric. Now,
No, that is categorically not true, and I'm not going to engage with this falsehood. Hate speech, frankly, is a stupid concept by definition. It should not exist. And rhetoric, unless it's actually followed through on, i.e., if digital threats turn into physical action, that is the only time I'm willing to use the phrase violent rhetoric. But here's the thing. Saying something like, get wrecked or get pwned, or you just got destroyed, is not some sort of threat to destroy something. Do you understand the difference between things that are said rhetorically in a abstract, non-physical environment and someone actually doing harm to someone? Because this idea that video games are a hub for violent rhetoric suggests to me that you can't tell the difference between someone playfully insulting someone else and someone threatening someone else. Like, Brainstormer and I regularly take jabs at each other and say over the top shit. But I know it's gonna throw the establishment for a loop here, but especially among men, that's how friends talk to each other. And rather than pathologizing it, you might actually try to empathize with young men instead of demonizing them. Just saying. Moving on.
So we have known this for a while. The 2014 harassment campaign, Gamergate, which claimed to be about a lack of objectivity in games journalism, but was really a reaction to increasing inclusivity and progressive thinking in game development, was a testing ground for the radicalization of young white men by alt-right influencers and news outlets such as Breitbart. Many of the apparatus of online right-wing extremism, including mass harassment and doxing of victims, originated in that rancid cauldron where female and LGBTQI plus, Jesus Christ, this is fucking alphabet, game developers and game makers of color who were made to fear for their lives.
What about all the women, the gay people, the black people, etc., who were on the side of Gamergate?
Those aren't real, apparently, to these idiots. Those aren't real people.
Which would thereby mean that neither of us is real, because I am gay, disabled, and of a religious minority background, and my friend Brainstormer here is a part Irish, part Latino fella who lives in the inner city.
I'm a mutt, basically. I'm not sure my entire heritage, because I've heard some things. I really should get a test or something.
Yeah, but regardless, he is somewhere in the category of people of color, despite how cringe that category is. Point being...
Don't get me started on the Latinx thing.
Oh, God. The word you could have used to be gender neutral with that is just cut off the suffix entirely and call it Latin, but never mind. Ugh. But yeah, point being, Brainstormer was probably too young and too, like, out of the loop to be supportive of Gamergate. But I explicitly did support Gamergate at the time.
I started coming in... Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I kind of came in around when Comicsgate was coming a thing, like 2016.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I was explicitly a lot more involved with Comicsgate than I was even with Gamergate. But being that as it may, I can attest as a leftist person that most of Gamergate supporters were either center left or center right. And a lot of us were gay, disabled, of various racial backgrounds, and or women. Like, I know most people probably aren't going to know who I'm talking about when I mention this, but Feisty Fan, she was a member of Comicsgate back in the day, and she was definitely a woman. Mecha Random 42, definitely a woman. Anna, or that Star Wars girl, definitely a woman. The list goes on and on and on. Shuon Head was a major player, or at least a side player in Gamergate. She was a woman. Liana Kersner explicitly had oodles and oodles of problems with Anita Sarkeesian, and yet no one seems to acknowledge her role in Gamergate. Christina Hoff Sommers, otherwise known as the Factual Feminist, was a supporter of Gamergate and also a advocate for men and boys during that same time period, etc. Like, in order for your upside down version of history to be accurate, there would have to be vanishingly few numbers of people of diverse backgrounds in Gamergate. But there weren't. They were in fact probably overrepresented statistically in Gamergate. The reason why you think Gamergate was anti-diversity is because you conflate people with different identity categories and people of a unilateral ideological preconception. You do know that not all gay people are critical queer theorists. Not all black people worship at the altar of Black Lives Matter. Not all women are feminists, etc., ad nauseum. You think that Gamergate was anti-diversity because you think intersectional feminism is the only way to be in favor of diversity, and it never was the case. Never. Niet, nil point. No such thing existed. There were women who opposed intersectional feminism. There were black people who opposed intersectional feminism, etc., ad nauseum. And there were people, especially during the Gamergate years, of various different identity demographics, who were basically all but told they have internalized exophobia, which, which is basically just a long-winded way of saying you're an identity traitor or that you have Stockholm syndrome. And let me tell you, if I have to throw my lot in with somebody, it's not going to be the people who think I hate myself just because I philosophically disagree with them. And by the way, insofar as I do hate myself, my identity has nothing to do with it. I occasionally hate myself because I have a pretty severe anxiety disorder that sometimes verges on the level of suicidality. But nevertheless.
Again, if you ever actually do that, we're not friends anymore.
Yes, I know. But yeah, point being, fuck your internalized self-hatred or internalized self-phobia bullshit, and fuck your implicit, like, race traitor / Stockholm syndrome bullshit too. You can be a gay person without being in favor of LGBT activism. You can be a black guy and not like Black Lives Matter. You can be a woman and be an anti-feminist. Or hell, you can even be a woman and be a men's rights advocate, considering that one of the largest groups on YouTube of men's rights advocates is a majority female group known as the Honey Badgers. All hail the Honey Badgers. But that's neither here nor there. Another famous one would probably be the Dadvocate at this point. But she is also a woman, and yet she's in favor of men's rights and so forth. So, yeah, you can take this opposing intersectional feminism is the same as opposing people who occupy this identity group category, and you can shove it promptly up your ass. Moving on.
Okay. It didn't end there. Toxic fandom has continued to dog the games industry. Developers of games who have sought to diversify their characters and narratives, or have simply delayed the launch of much anticipated titles, have faced mass online abuse and death threats. A friend of mine, once the media visible executive producer of a major game series, was forced to accept a police escort for him and his family for several days after fans of the game disagreed with several new features of the latest installment. More recently, it's been reported that members of the team working on Assassin's Creed Shadows were told by the company not to mention their role in the production on social media in case they were targeted and harassed.
Okay, but let's not act like the other side never did any swatting. Let's not act like fans of Anita Sarkeesian, Brianna Wu, and Zoe Quinn never went after Phil Mason, aka Thunderfoot, or Sargon of Akkad, or Boogie2988, or or Dave Cullen, aka Computing Forever, or hell, as much as I disagree with the fucker, they've even gone after people like EVS. EVS is, of course, a shyster and can go fuck himself, but nobody deserves to be swatted. Period. End of discussion. And let's not act like the pro social justice side doesn't engage explicitly in things like swatting, deplatforming, power mapping, etc., because it's explicitly a feature of their ideology. When anti-social justice people do it, it's mostly just because any movement large enough to have a voice is going to contain a certain percentage of people who are psychologically unstable. But when pro-social justice people do it, it's explicitly woven into the rhetoric and the framework of the ideology. So you can take this false equivalency and shove it up your ass. Moving on.
All right. Okay, I'm sorry. don't know why I'm so itchy lately.
Hmm.
All right. Shadows received a huge online backlash when it revealed that one of the two lead characters would be a black samurai. Okay, so I want to clarify this because I kept up with that a bit because I'm an Assassin's
Please.
Creed fan. It's not
Please.
that they were. It's not that they were. Fun thing. It's supposed to be based off Yasuke, right?
Yes.
And he was also kind of supposed to be an assassin. Granted, that would be weird for him to be able to blend into places because he was a black man in.
Imperial Japan.
Thank you. But also, and they kept saying the major issue I remember hearing about from like people who were criticizing Assassin's Creed Shadows was they kept toting it to be historically accurate, but
And it
everything
isn't.
hell, even like there was literally a channel of like Japanese like historians, like reactors who watched those trailers and heavily criticized them because they got everything wrong.
Yeah, and also let's throw this out as well. The loudest opposition to Assassin's Creed Shadows came from Japanese people who wanted to know why, if you can have a Assassin's Creed game set in England or in France or during the Age of Exploration and the whole pirate thing, if you can have representation of all these other historical cultures and historical eras and shit, why is the first Assassin's Creed game to heavily feature Japan not primarily about Japanese characters and Japanese culture? Why isn't Japan getting the same loyalty to representation that the pirate era of like the 1700s and so got? Like why can't you have a version of Assassin's Creed that features things like shoguns, ninjas, and samurais? Because that would be equivalent to the kind of representation that other cultures and time periods got.
Honestly, okay, and to be fair, there is. I had heard rumors, not rumors, but like there was like an original version because they heavily changed it, the original
Mm.
Shadows, right? Which was supposed
Mhm.
to revolve around a monk who became an assassin. Um,
That would have made a lot more sense, frankly.
I think it was like I can't remember the specific monk, like the type of monk. I think it was like one who was like strictly like for peace and stuff. And it was during like
Okay.
God, again, it's been a while since I've heard about this, but I just it's weird to me that yeah, just a lot of again the major backlash I remember people saying again, like you said with like the Japanese, is like it was just greatly again they were toting it as historically accurate, right?
And it wasn't.
It was not.
Which
Like
which which actually is kind of rare for the Assassin's Creed franchise as well, because they used to pride themselves on building the world so that it was mostly historically accurate, apart from obviously the like pseudo spiritual sci-fi elements, because of course world building. But it used to be like the standard that Assassin's Creed was tremendously faithful to whatever era or culture they were referencing. And yet the first Japanese game in that franchise doesn't appear to have any deference or fealty to accurately representing Japanese culture. Which, if I were Japanese, that would piss me off. I'm not Japanese, and it already pisses me off on historical accuracy grounds, because again, that used to be one of the best features um, of Assassin's Creed. They would actually hire historians so that they could weave small historical details into the story, and would have historians as consultants. But apparently now, in the modern age, where it's wrong to portray things as being culturally uniform, any Japanese fans of Assassin's Creed can apparently go fuck themselves for expecting that a game set in Japan would primarily feature Japanese culture. How dare they? Moving on.
Okay. Shadows received a huge online backlash when it was Trump didn't come up with the idea of the ludicrously misrepresenting the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) to appease right-leaning voters. Toxic game communities have been doing this for years. Oh my god.
No, again, nobody has a problem with lowercase d diversity. We have a problem with uppercase d diversity TM, because it is part of a post-Frankfurt School neo-Hegelian ideology that ruins everything it touches and then blames people of different identities for it, or uses those identities as human fucking shields. Which leads us to the thing where a bunch of gamergaters were people of diverse backgrounds who didn't feel like being used as a human shield. The hashtag #NotYourShield was literally a hashtag that was basically contemporaneous with Gamergate, because a bunch of diverse people of diverse backgrounds came out and said, fuck intersectional feminism, it doesn't speak for me, and stop using me as a human shield for your ideological and political bullshit. Which, just in case anyone is missing the point here, I will dust it off now. Hashtag #NotYourShield. Stop claiming you speak for me when you do nothing but ruin everything you touch. Moving on.
The worry in the current maelstrom is that the nuance of the problem will be lost, even while condemning gaming communities that worship influence such as Andrew Tate and Sneeko, that belittle women and share incel and red pill philosophies. It is impossible to recognize the hugely positive roles that online communities can play in the lives of teenagers.
Yeah, including those alleged incels of yours. Because the reason why incels have a bad rap is because isolation makes people go insane. And the kind of personal isolation that gets someone labeled an incel will make people go insane. This is, for example, why we don't condone solitary confinement in most cases anymore. Because locking someone in a dark room alone for an extended period of time and not giving them any meaningful human contact will drive even the most stable of people insane, let alone the unwashed ne'er-do-wells that usually get label of incel thrown at them. This is very much tantamount to that Joker scene again. In 2019's Joker, when Arthur finally snaps, he says, quote, "What do you get when you cross a broken society with a mentally ill loner, what do you get when you cross a mentally ill loner with a society that treats him like trash? You get what you fucking deserve." Obviously, shooting people is bad, and obviously psychologically snapping is bad. But if you deprive people of human connection consistently enough, especially if you attach moral blame to it, which most of the time the term incel does come with a certain level of moral blame, you're just going to make people more likely to go crazy. Because being told that you're an unmentionable and that you don't deserve people's sympathy, it's just going to make people death spiral even more. Moving on.
As a father of an autistic teen, I have seen my son flourishing through contact with other players in games such as Minecraft and Warframe. The last thing we need from politicians and attention-seeking lifestyle gurus is a blanket philosophy that boys need to stop playing video games or that all games are unhealthy. This isn't about screen time. It's not about getting boys to touch grass once in a while. We have to understand that our children are digital natives, as at home online they are as at home online as they are in any physical space. For many, there is no clear delineation. And honestly,
Okay,
hold on.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's one more sentence. And honestly, if you're shaking your head at how sad that is while spending hours a day perusing Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, then I don't know what to say to you.
That is fair. I will co-sign at least most of that. My issue is that you need to take that one more step further and point out this idea of online radicalization is bullshit. Full stop. It does not happen. The only people stuff like that happens to are people who are already teetering on the edge of sanity. And demonizing video games or the people that play them is not going to help that situation at all. It is just going to make it worse. And frankly, we've known ever since the Jack Thompson days that video games don't cause violence. They offer emotional catharsis and actually cause violent outbursts to go down because they provide a non-physical, non-harm-inducing outlet. And yet somehow we wind up having to have the same conversation again because intersectional feminist neo-Hegelian ideologues would rather believe that video games do cause violence after all than believe they could be wrong about anything ever. To which my response is, please, for the love of God, neo-Hegelians and other assorted intersectional types, just admit you're wrong sometimes and go back to assuming correctly that video games rarely, if ever, radicalize anyone. Moving on.
Alright, what can be done? Of course, the games industry has a responsibility, just like social media companies do, to monitor its communities and make them safe. Robust online moderation and the use of AI to monitor in-game chat for key slurs and subjects are a vital part of combating the problem.
No.
But, hold on. But in the long term, the problem of abusive, antisocial young men won't go away until we get to the source.
There are vanishingly few numbers of those people. I'm going to go through this again just for the sake of completeness. While most people that are abusers were themselves abused, the amount of people who are abused that go on to be abusers is vanishingly small. I'm going to go through that again just to be entirely clear. While most people who are abusers were themselves abused, the amount of people who are abused that go on to become abusers is actually very small. And frankly, here's another thing that's worth pointing out. There aren't that many abusive people. Like we're talking about like 5 to 10% of the population at most, I should say, not at best, because obviously it's a bad thing if ever anyone is abused. But gaming doesn't make people abusive or radical. Shows and movies and stories and books and things don't make people radical. What makes people radical, typically, is repeatedly refusing to give anyone intellectual or emotional empathy whatsoever. You want to make a suicide bomber? Then you need to deprive someone of necessary human connection. Calling the people who are unstable or radicalizable incels, or calling them man babies, or saying that they are immoral and should be shunned from every corner of civilization, does not prevent radicalization, and moral fagging about radicalization won't help either. What will help, if anything, is reminding yourselves that people who disagree with you are also morally valid. If you could get that concept through your head and stop blaming every part of culture except the ones you're responsible for, that would be amazing. But you're probably not going to do that, because that would admit that sometimes you are either wrong or refusing to acknowledge a person with different perspectives than yours that are also valid. while simultaneously blaming everyone but yourselves for that. Moving on.
All right. Many young men in 2025 lack a sense of direction, identity, and purpose. Traditional careers are disappearing. Social changes are challenging historical masculine roles. Mental health services are hard to access. City centers are dying. Whatever the truth of the matter, whatever we want to say about privilege, the world feels openly hostile to them. And into this vortex come online influencers who will harness, direct, and ultimately monetize that sense of hopelessness and rage, pointing at easily identifiable targets: women, immigrants, libtards, beta males, and yes, the makers of progressive video games.
Okay,
There's something there, but I think he's going about it the wrong way.
it's buried in a completely backwards premise, which is, instead of telling young boys how privileged they are in contrary to all of reality, you might potentially entertain the idea that your intersectional feminist hierarchy of victimhood and oppression is wrong. You might entertain the idea that sometimes men are the victims. Even straight men, even able-bodied men, even white men. Like, men are sometimes the victims because they are men. Not in spite of the fact that they are men, but because they are men. Because there are human rights issues that are specific to the male experience that are not being addressed. And the second you get that premise through your heads is the day we might finally start making headway to this. But instead of addressing the human rights issues that afflict men as a whole in general, you're going to demonize the men who don't live up to your standards of productivity, attractiveness, or efficacy. And you wonder why so many of those people who you demonize and dehumanize and shun wind up showing up again and trying to metaphorically burn the village to the ground. Again, I would direct you in the direction of the movie Joker. If you don't want there to be more Arthur Flecks, stop fucking making them over and over and over again. Stop producing the one bad day type scenarios. Because and to defend the, unmentionable incels out there, I will repeat this as often as I have to. Very few people who go on to abuse, excuse me, most people who go on to abuse were themselves abused, but very few people who were abused become abusers. It is a vanishingly small amount of people who go on to abuse other people because of their own personal issues. That being said, however, the best way to prevent a smaller, or rather to cause a smaller number of abusers to come into existence is to prevent people from being abused to begin with. And here's going to be the part that head fucks a lot of you. The institutional dominance of ideologies like neo-Hegelianism or Gramsciite ideologies or neo-Hegelian ideologies or intersectional feminist ideologies is one of the factors that makes people become pathologically isolated, i.e., feminism of the intersectional variety or of the post-Frankfurt School variety or the neo-Hegelian variety is part of the problem, not a potential solution. But that would require you to admit that intersectional feminism is sometimes dead wrong and accountable for being dead wrong. and most of academia would rather believe that there are demons hiding around every corner, or that every boy and every man is a potential monster, than believe that they and their ideologies have ever done anything wrong, or they might be to blame accurately for things. Maybe intellectual snobs of the internet and academia, maybe if you want to know what the problem with society is, instead of assuming you already know the correct answer, have you considered trying to ask the people who are in dire straits? And by ask them what the problem is, I don't mean ask them and then reframe and recontextualize the conversation. I mean ask them and actually listen and take on board what they tell you, rather than assume that you're morally and intellectually superior to everyone, despite being an out-of-touch, pompous aristocrat. Just saying. Moving on.
Alright, a little bit left. I have spent my whole career defending video games as a medium from those who seek to demonize the entire culture, but you simply cannot approach this subject without recognizing the games community, traditionally dominated by young men interested in violent power fantasies, is part of it.
Yes, and those violent power fantasies that young boys have, actually, we have information that suggests it decreases violent impulses, not increasing them. And I know because we dealt with this back in the day with Jack Thompson. He thought that video games caused violent outbursts too. He was also wrong, because as it turns out, rather than intensifying the part of the brain that creates violent impulses, the amygdala, we have discovered through actual data that playing violent video games allows you to reach a non-physical form of catharsis for your violent impulses, thereby causing violent impulses to go down rather than up. It's not simply that you are incorrect. It is that you are flat out wrong in your fundamental premise, and yet you are still proceeding as though your premise is true, and it isn't. It's not simply that you think a wrong thing. It's that you think literally the opposite of reality. And the second you stop being persuaded by the exact opposite of reality, the second we might actually start making headway on this. But just like Jack Thompson needed to hear this back in the day, you need to hear it now. Video games decrease violent radicalism by offering non-physical catharsis for those impulses. They do not, and never have, as far as we can tell, increase those tendencies. And they never have. Moving
on. Young people often come to games to escape, to become virtual superheroes, but their vulnerability and lack of experience makes them targets and victims. It's going to take more than one brilliant TV drama to get society to address this pressing problem, but when it does, the games industry is going to have to be a big part of the difficult conversations to come.
Okay, I have seen some of Adolescence. It is shit. And it is shit for the exact reason that Joker, in fact, was not. Namely, it blames every factor other than the fact that young men and boys might have a reason to feel hard done by, i.e., that they might actually be getting the short end of the stick on various human rights issues. And this is the problem. This is why you people will never make headway, because you would rather conjure from thin fucking air any excuse to blame men and boys, rather than admit that men and boys do sometimes get the short end of the stick. Because they are men. Not in spite of the fact that they are men, but specifically because they are men, and we treat men differently in our society than we treat most women. The correct answer is to equalize this rights issue by, engaging in men's rights activism or advocacy in the exact same way that rich women a century ago engaged in women's rights advocacy. But you would rather do anything and everything other than admit that men are vulnerable to certain factors specifically because they are men. And that is why this will never get better. Because you will conjure things from thin air rather than admit to the reality of the situation. Moving on.
Oh shit! Sorry, I forgot I muted myself for the. I was setting up the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, moving on to like trailers and stuff or like videos. So fun fact, Dawn actually sent this before me. I was gonna send it, but I just missed it, which is the inverse of what we usually do.
Yeah, I saw people reacting to it, so I figured that's usually how I know one of these comes out, is when I see people in my YouTube recommended feed reacting to it.
Usually this stuff pops up in my recommended feed, so that's how I usually find out about it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is a sneak peek for Superman. I have seen it. I'm sure Dawn has as well.
I have, yes.
I'm sure we have two very different opinions of it.
Yep, because this happens.
Although I understand Dawn's thing, I do think, again, just keep in mind, he's the bitter cynic out of the two of us.
I am. This is true. This is fair enough.
Although I will say, I think people comparing this to like Man of Steel and Zack Snyder's Superman saying that's better is incredible.
Yeah. To reiterate for the sake of clarity again, Henry Cavill would have made an excellent Superman. Absolutely perfect. But he was never allowed to, because rather than play the hand of cards he was dealt, Zack Snyder took a character who is all about idealism, compassion, altruism, and bordering on pacifism, and made him a cynical Randian objectivist character who needs a personal reason not to kill rather than being able to kill on the principle that killing is bad.
Right.
That being said, I do have criticisms of this, and we will get into those.
I can certainly guess some of your criticisms.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure you can.
But I'll try to be positive. Anyway, let's get into this because it's about 5 minutes.
Banana.
No, did we have anything? No.
I think at one point we used Hostess fruit pies because of all the old comic ads.
I don't know if that was for this or was for something else. I know I think we did, but well, wait.
All right.
Okay, because you always say the same. You always say the thing when you're describing them. Apple pie.
Yeah, apple pie.
I do like they're using the old logo.
Mm-hmm.
I figure you're gonna bitch about this, obviously, which you have before. So
it's like it bothers me even more because now it's definitively not a one-off. I figured they used it the first. I was actually willing to give them some benefit of the doubt the first time by saying that I'm sure a lot of the visuals aren't ready yet, so they were saving. But this is the third time, I think, that they have used this image or this sequence as the
Twice.
first shot in the trailer.
Well, no, no, it's just twice. This thing and the trailer.
Okay. They had a kind of similar thing in that his suit was stained in the promo image. But regardless, I will reiterate my criticism from last time. People want to see Superman as the larger than life symbol of purity and goodness. Opening your trailer with him beaten to the point of near death and wheezing painfully was a really stupid idea that you appear to be doubling down on.
I like how nice the North looks. The Antarctica.
Oh yeah, the shot composition is fine. I have no
Well, I will be fully
issues with the
honest.
aesthetics. It's
Okay,
just,
so I do have one criticism. It's just because it's me.
Mhm.
I feel like there could be more shading. Like there should be a little more contrast.
yeah,
You know?
if the blacks were a bit darker, the whites would pop more. I agree.
Yeah. I think it's kind of easy to tell that it is fake. Like, okay, don't get me wrong. Not the biggest fan of the writing for Zack Snyder's Superman, but with Man of Steel, yes, you can make the argument with like the artsy fartsy kind of shots they done.
Mm.
But when in specifically the first flight scene of Man of Steel,
Mm.
that looked amazing in like the Arctic. So
Right, and whatever else you may think of Zack Snyder, but you can't deny that he or whoever his cinematographer is fucking brilliant at like depicting the male form, like to the point that like it's I, I'm tempted to use the word pornographic, but I feel like that's going to be misinterpreted as me disparaging it. But yeah, Zack Snyder is very good at depicting the male form, and in particular, male power. So, like, whatever else you may think of the Zack Snyder films, they were by and large shit because Zack Snyder is a hack who can't resist projecting radiant objectivism where it doesn't belong. He's very good at depicting the male form in that over the top comic book style that something like this does benefit from. And maybe that is part of why the beaten to death wheezing thing bothers me as much as it does, because it almost feels like, again, I might be filling in some gaps where it's unnecessary here, but it almost feels like they're deliberately doing the opposite of Zack Snyder, like as much as they feasibly can. And on some kind of paper, that makes sense because a lot of Zack Snyder's decisions were stupid. But the one thing you shouldn't have done the opposite of is the aesthetic of how powerful Superman should look and be. You can fix everything else that Zack Snyder ever did, but please, for the love of God, keep the comic book aesthetics and the larger than life symbols of like male power and male physique, because that is actually a good thing he did and should be left alone. Moving on. Apple pie.
Yep. I got nothing to say really.
Yeah, I've already said my piece, although I will add, God, this seems to be going on for far too long. Like, even in the headspace where they think showing Superman's weaknesses is a good idea so people aren't afraid of him being overpowered, which I think is what they're going for here. Even though that's kind of a stupid duplicitous criticism in and of itself. I think what they're going for here is showing that Superman can be hurt so people aren't hyperfixating on the he's too powerful, it's a problem thing. They are lingering on it a bit too much.
I can at least see where you're coming with on that. I don't I think the issue again is like we haven't seen. I think this scene would be fine if we saw him doing more heroic stuff first.
Yeah, like having this scene at the end of your trailer to emphasize like, oh shit just got real, now let's end on a cliffhanger. That I could almost see. But beginning both the trailer and now this sneak peek with this scene, it comes across as spiteful. And given how much modern day writers just don't seem to, not only do most modern day writers not seem to get Superman, but they actively seem as though they don't want to. Given that zeitgeist, starting both of your trailers or trailer adjacent things with this scene really feels like you're crapping on Superman and making him look weak on purpose. Even while I know that I think, like, I'm willing to concede that the headspace that the writers were probably in was everyone always complains Superman is invulnerable, let's show him being weakened so that the people who complain about him being too powerful will shut the fuck up finally. Which, fair, but for the rest of us who don't have that stupid hyperfixation on his powers and actually give a damn about his character, I'd rather see him as an incorruptible symbol of goodness at least a few times before we saw him beat Tao.
I think the issue is that it's not really showing. We'll get into it, but
yeah,
Apple
pie. Yep.
Yeah, no, this shot looks good. I don't know why, like, with a shot of him in the crashed ground doesn't look that great.
I think you were on the right track when you said the contrast should be a little bit sharper.
Yeah.
Like, even this shot probably would benefit from the contrast being just the tiniest bit sharper. Even though it is a good shot. I'm not disparaging that. Anyway, apple pie.
Stop!
Okay, I feel like I know what you're going to say, but to me, this does feel like something. For one thing, this is what dogs do before they realize.
Yeah, it's cute. It's like Fred Flintstone and Dino, kind of.
Yeah. But I feel like there's a butt coming from you.
But yeah, it does. As cute as it is in theory, it does once again emphasize the beaten, broken Superman, and I'm sure you even more than I am here, but I'm so sick of stories and writers needing to tear Superman down because, oh, he's just too powerful, don't you know? Write the character, not the powers, you morons. Like, it's not that hard.
So I'm going to be fully honest with you. I'm not seeing a teardown here, but I get what you're saying. I'm just not seeing. I personally am not seeing the teardown. I do think the issue again is like focusing on this Like, honestly, why not we get the sneak peek of like him being Clark at the Daily Planet and like the chemistry between him and Lois and all the other people at the Daily Planet? You know, build those characters up and stuff. Like,
Or hell, a montage of him saving people and doing the like day-to-day save the cat thing. That would actually be something to start a trailer with. What I meant with regards to this scene kind of doubling down on the problem is it's showing his dog hurting him. Accidentally, because dogs be dogs, but it's showing his dog hurting him. And given how the scene opened with the wheezing, showing him even being hurt by his dog accidentally is a little it rubs some salt in the wound, and the wound shouldn't be salted like that. Also, just being pedantic and shitty because something I grew up with, I'd honestly prefer it if Crypto could talk.
I'm also gonna be honest. I don't mind the design of Crypto because he's a cute and adorable little boy.
Yeah.
But usually when I've pictured Crypto, I've kind of pictured like either something that looks similar to a greyhound, or if we really
like a Great Dane somewhere in there.
well, I said greyhound, which are a little smaller but
Right.
leaner. I have thought of Great Dane just like for the power thing.
I think that was what they made him look like in the Crypto the Superdog cartoon I remember as a kid. They made him look somewhere between like an Irish Wolfhound and a Great Dane. Anyway,
He's still
Apple Pie.
he's still cute. I think it could have been better. Like I think even like the Titan show that had him briefly on there had a
Yeah, because he escaped the same facility that Connor was in.
Of course you remember that.
Connor's cute, and I'm not going to apologize for noticing that Connor's cute.
All right. All right. Apple pie.
Apple pie.
Take me home. Home. To be fair, again, he's also supposed to be a dog from Krypton, so I'm also thinking like he kind of is just to separate him from like normal Earth dogs. He should look a little different, right?
Right. Just to, make the point of he's alien dog.
Yeah. But I got nothing else to say here, to be fair.
Yeah, apple pie.
Apple pie. Crypto. Home.
I assume this is going to be a variation on the Superman theme they're using for the movie. I do like this theme. It's different enough from the original 78 one, while still obviously having kind of an homage to it, which is nice. If you know if what I'm saying makes sense.
No, I get it. Although I don't think this is the theme they're playing, mind you, because I think we heard that in the first trailer, and it doesn't really sound like that. To be fair, this could just be a specific score for this scene.
It's possible, but at the very least, like it's a good soundtrack. I can see it being somewhat memorable, which is good. And I'm glad that they, at least in this scene, didn't do what's essentially become a cliche now and do the Starman song. It still baffles me that there are literally songs that feature Superman in them, and they didn't bother to think of those rather than David Bowie's Starman. Like, why? Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
Apple pie.
I do like the Fortress of Solitude.
Yeah, it's very similar to the 1978 one, but
still
honestly,
kind of its own
it's
thing, right? Because it's a lot more like taller and not as big, right?
right. Yeah,
I do like that it's growing out of the ground too. Like it's hidden, right?
right. They're still doing the crystal technology thing, which is nice.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Again, it actually like this looks pretty good. Again, I like minor nitpick obviously is like maybe a little higher in the saturation, maybe a little more of the contrast. That's about it. You know, like visually it's still pretty stunning.
Yeah, it looks like a live action version of a comic book, which it's supposed to. So yeah. Anyway, apple pie.
Yeah, one sec. Okay.
That was cool with the like gate opening. That was cool.
Yeah, although I will be fully honest, I get it, but I also like because they are taking some inspiration from, you know, All Star Superman a bit. I kind of miss the Dwarf Star key.
Right. Because he's the only one who can move it. Yeah.
Well, someone of his strength, basically. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But and I just like the funny little knot. Like the funny thing is like he has a mat. Like he just keeps it under a mat in front of the door.
Because it doesn't matter that it's the Arctic. He's still going to have a welcome mat there because he's just that much of a.
But because
roll.
like they have it because it goes underground. Basically, it doesn't make sense to have it. I get it, but maybe it's just me being a little bit of a like. I wish it was a little weirder, a little more like hokey.
Especially with it being James Gunn, yeah, I kind of wish they would take a little bit more Silver Age type inspiration.
I do.
They obviously have some of it. I'm just saying it could do with
Yeah.
a little bit more. I
You know,
agree.
it could be a little. It could be a little better. And it's cool that they're doing like the Superman bots because that's actually like a big thing. Granted, these aren't like the Superman drones I think they use, which are like basically like life model decoys Superman has in case he goes off road that they'll protect the planet. These are like his well the caretakers of the fortress when he's not there.
Right. And this is me being probably a little bit selfish again, but I miss the like orb-based technology from Superman the animated series. The information orb things.
I can see that. Honestly, to be fair, like the DCAU, the DC Animated Universe, took a lot of did really like Jack Kirby-esque with the art style and
yeah, like gold standard for how you adapt a comic book.
Yeah. I really would actually like to see some more like I mean we get a little bit of it here and there with like Marvel obviously. Granted they kind of fuck it up a lot.
Yeah, especially lately. But
God, if
should be a lot easier than it is, but people are dumb, unfortunately.
Well, just to be fair, look, to be fair, when Jack Kirby created that stuff, it was during the '60s. the psychedelic age, the space age, all that shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's very weird, very like grandiose. I mean, like they were very intricately made and stuff. Still cool, and I'm not lying. I'm not lying again. I think if you have someone that's like purely super passionate about it, they can make it work.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Kind of like, is it Joe Johnson, the guy that did Rocketeer and then did Captain America: First Avenger?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Or I mentioned this when we did that review of Eternals. Robert Rodriguez. Robert Rodriguez is really good at doing that. If he did what he did for Shark Boy and Lava Girl with an actual budget behind him, that would be almost like a perfect 1-to-1 Jack Kirby.
I recently saw a video about a fan theory of Shark Boy and Lava Girl. I should put that in the Discord and like send it to you, man. Like that is.
I love that setting has fan theories because, like, damn, Robert Rodriguez has so much passion for the things he loves, and I love that so much. I wish we lived in a world where they had tapped Robert Rodriguez to do Eternals, because that would have been perfect. With Marvel's money and resources and Robert Rodriguez's love of sort of pseudo Jack Kirby aesthetics, that could have been something special. Instead of Chloe Zhao trying to do her ripoff of Denis Villeneuve's ripoff of Christopher Nolan. Anyway, moving on. Apple pie.
Yeah.
No need to thank us, sir, as we will not appreciate it. We have no consciousness whatsoever, merely automatons here to serve. Meet 12.
So, I remember seeing someone mention this on Twitter when I was scrolling it. It's very in line with Superman to treat them as people. Like, thank them. And, like, he even, like, if you actually paid attention to what he was, like, he was speaking in Kryptonian, greeting each and every one of them.
Well, I mean, because Clark is just that much of a cinnamon roll.
Yeah.
Although, maybe this is just me reading too much into this, but when I heard this exchange, the "we have no consciousness to appreciate it" thing, I call bullshit on that.
They are, I mean, like, they are literally able to respond in, like, almost a human-like manner.
And they appear to have personalities, because I mean, look at the scene we stopped it on. Like, he says, "Meet 12, she's new." One, why would she even have a gender if she had no consciousness? And two, why would the robot that's speaking have any opinion on the new one if he had no consciousness or personality? So I call bullshit.
I think that's just how they think of themselves. Like, they don't think themselves highly because, again, they're servants effectively.
Right. But nevertheless, I call bullshit on the "we have no consciousness to appreciate it."
It's pretty cool that they're wearing capes.
Yeah.
Although I will be honest, the heads are a bit weird for me. I think it's just like the single ocular thing.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wish they went with like the designs like that have the two eyes.
Another thing this is useful for, assuming this movie is successful enough to warrant sequels, the existence of these guys is going to make introducing Brainiac to live action movies finally a lot easier. Because I can kind of see the seeds of a Brainiac design in these guys a little bit. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. They actually also could like weird idea, obviously, because it's like a completely alternate Superman. Red Sun, right?
As in the communist one?
Just bear with me here. Granted, I'm going off my information from the animated movie that came out.
Right.
Brainiac was a robot servant of that, who went rogue, trying to complete the mission that Superman had.
Interestingly enough, the word robot actually comes from a Czech word that means worker or servant.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Also, that's Alan Tudyk, by the way, who was also Dr. Phosphorus.
Which, I mean, I'm not opposed to using using the same voice actor for multiple characters if it works. I actually recently started watching Gargoyles again, and I love how in that show they wove the need to reuse voice actors actually into the plot, because some of the characters are fairies in disguise, or revealed to be fairies in disguise, and you know that that plot thread never would have come about if they had had enough money to hire multiple voice actors.
Yeah. All right. Apple pie.
Apple pie. Oh, butter.
Is new.
He looked at me.
See, okay, yeah, you're right. Like,
Yeah, she laughed. I mean, I get that you could program a robot to mimic human behavior, and let's be honest, Clark definitely would. But it still makes me want to call bullshit on the "I have no consciousness to appreciate your interactions" thing.
Yeah. Although, if I remember the first trailer, there was one quick scene that showed Superman over one of the robots.
Bless you.
Thank you. That had been destroyed. So makes me wonder who's. I almost want to say it's 12 because they're giving her the most personality so far.
Uh-huh.
Which makes me think they're going to make us really care about these robots.
Which is going to make it all the more tragic when they need to introduce Brainiac in one of the future movies, and we see him as like a corrupted, evil version of one of these guys, or something. But you know what? That would be a really cool story, though, to have Clark redeem Brainiac, and it would also set up Brainiac 5 in Legion of Superheroes if James Gunn ever feels like adapting that.
You know, I have my own.
Because the Legion is awesome.
Sorry. I have my own idea of how to do Brainiac being from Krypton. I think I mentioned it to you a long time ago. So he was like,
but I don't remember it at this particular moment.
Yeah. So the idea was like it was an AI it was Jor-El, Kal-El's father, Superman's father, from Krypton, right? Helped establish and build a AI that was to help automate all of Krypton and basically make it able so it can basically run all the things that need to be run.
Which they kind of did that in Superman the Animated Series.
I'm not gonna lie, that's where it was inspired from.
Brainiac essentially being almost the like big brother equivalent of Krypton.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. And idea was like it basically became Skynet effectively for Krypton. And basically it was harvesting the planet so much to create like its automatons and machines.
Okay, that's an interesting thing. I assume something similar to like the self-replicating nanobots type thing.
Something like that, but again, like it was just basically like mining the planet to cause its destruction, right?
Which, of all things it could remind me of, it reminds me of that one episode of Rick and Morty with Pluto.
Yeah, and it had quite the it's. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of inspirations, obviously, like Ultron, both like the movie Ultron and like comics Ultron, of like it's mechanical but also heavily emotional, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
And the connection obviously between Cal and Brainiac is like they're somewhat. I think you
Brothers,
missed.
because Jor-El made him. Yeah.
To be fair, this was all what I came up with when I was trying to actually write a pitch idea for Superman Lives.
Mm.
Like that was supposed to be the opening prologue to set that stuff up.
Yeah, I have two requests when it comes to future Superman sequels and getting around to more elements of his rogues gallery than just Lex. Brainiac needs to make his big screen debut, and Mixie Spitwick should make his big screen debut finally.
Honestly,
it annoys me that for the like 6 or 7 ones from the 70s and all the other ones too, we still haven't gotten a Brainiac or a Mixie in live action. I mean, we did get them in live action on stuff like Smallville and Lois and Clark: New Adventures of Superman. Like Howie Mandel played Mixie fine in like the Christmas episode of that.
Also Supergirl.
But that being that as it may, to do Mixie right or to do Brainiac right, you need a big ass blockbuster movie budget. Because you think the Doctor Strange movies have been trippy? Wait for them to introduce Mixie in the Superman movies. You ain't seen nothing yet.
All right, Joey.
Yep, apple pie.
Apple pie.
Meet 12. She's new.
I rewound it.
He looked at me.
14 fractured bones.
Damage to bladder, kidney, large intestine, lungs.
With a healthy dose of yellow sun, we'll have you up and at 'em in no time.
I like how it moves. Actually, that's pretty interesting and cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fortress, it shifts and stuff.
Yeah, it plays up the like crystalline technology aspect really nice.
And again, it looks really cool.
Mm-hmm. I do wish there was more stuff in it, but maybe that'll develop as the movies go on, assuming this movie does well enough to justify sequels. Like maybe we'll start seeing mementos of the various villains that Clark fights in the fortress.
Yeah.
Kind of like what they tried to do with the Batcave in BVS, except with actual setup, because you can't do Batman vs Superman without setup, you moron. But oh well. Anyway, apple pie.
Yeah.
Level 4, 292 times Saharan Prime, please. 1.
What was that? My imagination, or was there a little bit of the John Williams theme stuck in there?
Yeah, it was starting.
Yeah, I heard the do, and I'm like, that is definitely the John Williams theme. Which, I mean, to be fair, Superman the Animated Series also used the John Williams theme, so clearly it's it's kind of like the Batman the Animated Series theme is the same one from the Tim Burton movies. It when you get something that right, you don't need to monkey with it. Like any attempt to monkey with it will ultimately just break it further. So don't monkey with it. Don't fix what is not broken. Apple pie.
Yep.
He's back.
Yeah, again, I think some people were talking about like the aesthetics. Like, I don't get it. Like with this, like it's supposed to be more tried and true to Superman
Mm-hmm.
than trying to make him look like some untouchable, unfeeling god.
Yeah. He is like de facto untouchable, but not on an emotional level. That's always been frankly, that's always been how his villains get to him, because they know they don't they know they by and large can't really do much unless, the kryptonite MacGuffin is a thing.
Or magic.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, no, he has gotten injured and stuff. He's going up against people that can fight him.
Right, but as a general rule, the more satisfying Superman stories are when they offer him an emotional or philosophical dilemma. Like you can
I
either
agree. I'm just
you
saying,
can
like,
either save this person or you can save that person or something like that.
John, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm saying the major argument is like he's too powerful when in fact he's not.
As I have often quoted,
Powerful for a mortal.
yeah, you are strong for a mortal, but a mortal is all you are. Like there are so many abilities that gods are supposed to have, and that we actually see gods in the DC universe having, that Clark does not have. He's supposed to be the platonic ideal of what a human man can be. He's never supposed to have been a god. And that's another one of those things that every asshole who thinks they can be clever and edgy and subvert Superman keeps trying to pull the he's a god above everyone card. When, for one thing, that's not even how Clark sees himself. This goes back to the thing I mentioned last time we were discussing the Alan Moore thing, of Superman does not see it as his place to have ideas above his station. No matter how powerful he is, he's very sparing of how he uses it, because, to borrow from the DC animated universe again, he's living in a world made of cardboard and glass, and he knows he is. But unlike the way most assholes want to write him, which is he should treat people like they're made of cardboard relative to him, he sees the fact that everyone else is made of cardboard as a bad thing and a responsibility that he therefore has to take on to not break the people he cares about. Because no matter how powerful he is relative to normal humans, he sees himself, maybe not factually species wise, but he sees himself as a human. He does not see himself as separate from humanity or above humanity or anything. He sees himself as a human who can help people the way no one else can, and so he obligates himself to do so. But most people cannot come to terms with the fact that Superman would willingly submit to that kind of obligation. Because, well, if no one can make him do stuff, why would he do stuff? As if he doesn't have opinions or personality of his own for some reason. Apple pie.
Apple pie.
See, I like this montage. I wish it had started.
It's from the
with
first trailer.
Yeah. Yeah, but I wish the trailers had started with this montage rather than ending with it. Anyway, apple pie.
Yeah. I really want this to be good.
I hope, at least for your sake, that it is.
Like, it looks good, but there obviously are the small things there that could add up.
Yeah. It's just one of those flip the coin and see which head it lands on sort of thing. Will the minor quibbles we've noticed remain minor quibbles, or will they snowball and accumulate and sink the good things about it?
Mhm.
I'm hoping that it doesn't, especially for your sake. But I'm not gonna have someone piss on my leg and then try and tell me it's raining.
I don't want to know what you're into, man.
Okay, that one was good one. I will give you that. You get points for that one, sir. Anyway, next.
Yeah, one sec.
Oh. I don't know why I keep yawning. We both have been yawning up the storm the whole while. Oh, Jesus.
Just give me a second. I was setting it up. So this is something I randomly found. The official teaser trailer for The Naked Gun in 2025. It's like the official teaser trailer. It's only a minute, so.
Mhm.
Starring Liam Neeson and Pamela Anderson.
Are there any like Naked Gun related foodstuffs we can use in place of a banana, or do you want to just do banana?
I'm gonna be honest, I haven't seen The Naked Gun in a while. You know, it actually okay. So, fun fact: The Naked Gun was only created because the original show that would have starred Leslie Nielsen, the actor who played main character in Naked Gun, which was called Police Squad.
Mm.
Those movies were only made because the Police Squad, the show, got canceled because the executives didn't think people would get all the jokes because they were basically telling jokes a minute.
So it's Firefly Serenity sort of situation.
Kinda. Basically, yeah, the Naked Gun movies were made because out of like a cancellation of a show that would. To be fair, I think it was canceled like after 1 or 2 episodes.
Shame. Yeah, unfortunately, studios being morons is not exclusively a modern phenomenon.
Hold on. So. Yeah, it looks like they're doing a reboot of it. It's the first I was hearing of it with this teaser I saw.
Mhm. Banana?
Yeah, ABC was the network for Police Squad. Series featured sight gags, wordplay, and non sequiturs. 6 episodes, 1 season.
Damn.
March 4th to July 8th, 1982.
That sucks.
And then we got the Naked Gun. Yeah, the Naked Gun was like basically scripts or stuff they had planned for the series and basically just remade them into movies.
Well, at least something good came of it, but I'm curious what a world where the whole show got released would have, what would that world have been like? Anyway, Banana.
Banana.
Multiple SWAT units responding to hostage situation.
Hey, little girl, stop!
I want to let this play out because you're going to find it so fucking hilarious.
All right. Banana.
Banana.
What do you want, little one? Your ass.
That's the sound of the police. That's the sound of the beast.
Well, I've had days like that.
That's the sound of the beast.
Who are you?
Frank Drebin, Police Squad.
Although, I really kind of wish he would have just been another character in himself instead of playing the main character of the Naked Gun movies.
Mm.
But
Like a sequel series set in the same universe instead of a remake.
yeah, he could have been like the okay, I was set in the 80s, so yeah, no, he could have been. He could be the son or son of the original Frank Drebin.
Mm-hmm. Frank Drebin Jr. or something along those lines.
I would have gone. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna look up how old Liam Neeson is. But it's also cool to know that he's not like he's a serious actor. I'm not gonna deny that,
Mm-hmm.
and I love all his works. But the guy also has a sense of humor, so he's
Mhm.
willing to like take on. I mean, to be fair, this is he's playing like a. He's playing a serious character in an absurd world. Which, to be fair, that was kind of the movie series overall. So
He doesn't want to be taken too seriously, but Tish.
low hanging fruit, man.
I am sorry it was there. It had to be done.
You're better than that.
No, I'm not.
He's 72. He was born in 1952.
Which means in the 80s he would have been in his 30s, if I'm doing my math right.
I believe so.
So yeah, I guess it does make sense to have him play an older version of the same character.
Well, no, the character was already old in the original movies, so unless the dude's immortal.
Oh yeah, so it could have been his son. Okay, but in any case, Banana.
Or hell, have him be like the protege of the original of Frank Drebin. Again, like different character, yeah. It's just funny that he was basically kicking ass in like a schoolgirl's uniform.
Well, I mean, it worked for Thor.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. What the fuck do you mean you had some dates like that?
Go back to the scene, and then
No,
you'll get it.
I remember the scene. I heard you say it while we were watching it.
Think it through.
I'm just that feel okay. Knowing you, those guys would have to have been very close. Oh, never mind. No, right. Okay, now I remember. Right, I forget. Apparently, there are a lot of guys that want to be your. I'm not gonna say it, but I know what.
Yeah, I do. Oh God, yeah, it's not.
To be
He's
fair,
not pleasant.
if you did accept, you would never have to worry about. You would be pampered, which seems like a thing for you.
Honestly, I'd rather be the one doing the pampering in that scenario. Because I would basically be a upscale ritzy house husband.
All right. Anyway, it's about 20 seconds left. Sorry.
Yep, banana.
Banana.
The new version.
That's the sound of the police.
Okay.
Hi, Daddy. It's me, Frank Jr. Love you. Hey, Dad.
Okay.
So they actually did do the thing we were suggesting that they do. Well, I'll be damned.
Holy shit.
I've never seen a trailer go jinxed quite so severely as this one did.
Also, I believe it said it was produced by Seth MacFarlane, which is cool.
That could either go over amazingly or it could go over horribly. There is no in between with Seth MacFarlane.
Directed by Akiva Schaffer. I'm gonna look that up because the name sounds familiar, but okay, so I didn't watch the whole thing through apparently.
Yep, the trailer literally just went jinxed.
And it's set in the same universe too. So okay, I thought it was a reboot. You know, because how it usually is.
Yep, but the trailer heard our ideas in the future and went and hold my beer. Apparently.
Okay, Akiva Schaffer has done a lot of stuff. So, obviously doing the Naked Gun, did Hot Rod, MacGruber, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers.
The movie?
Yes.
Okay, this movie could potentially be very, very good then.
Neighbors, you know, Seth Rogen and
Zac Efron.
Yeah. Weird, the Al Yankovic story. Grown Ups 2.
Okay, this has the potential to be very good then.
He did Scream 6. Too.
I will not hold that one against him. The Scream franchise was kind of zombie-fied at that point.
Brigsby Bear, Awesome Town, Palm Springs. Oh, I've seen clips of Palm Springs. It's actually not a bad movie. Like there's like a couple people trapped in like. I think it was. I like I said, I've only seen clips. I don't know the whole story of the movie, but 2 people are trapped in a time loop.
This could go very well, in fact, given those films as a pedigree.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool that they're making. I mean, to be fair, if Seth MacFarlane's working on it, he's going to pay homage and reference and he's not going to be an asshole, you know, and like try to be like different from the originals or anything.
Right.
I mean, okay, I don't know how you feel about Million Ways to Die in the West. I like it actually. It's kind of fun.
It's fun. It's a little bit too gag happy at times,
Fair enough.
but it's not bad.
To be fair, I mean, if you have a movie called A Million Ways to Die in the West, the gag obviously is I think
my favorite gag from that movie is if you pay attention to it, the events of Back to the Future Part 3 are happening in the background.
I only remember the one cutscene, the one scene with Doc Brown. So I might have missed it then.
But that's such a cool gag though to do a Western and just decide, you know what, fuck it, we're tying in Back to the Future Part 3 because fuck you, that's why.
Yeah.
I wish Family Guy cutaways had more of that kind of logic to them. That would make them better, I think.
To be fair, they used to have them again.
Yeah, they used to, and then
Fox.
Go ahead.
Fox is obviously, again, it's pretty obvious in the later seasons. Seth MacFarlane doesn't want to keep doing it because Fox or whoever is keeping him on to make more. Is basically forcing him to do
it. They're basically making him the animation equivalent of a sweatshop worker. I think my favorite of the old school Family Guy cutaways was the Stewie goes to see the remake of Bewitched, and Will Ferrell makes a horrible joke. So he flies across the country, buys a ladder, finds his mansion and everything just to knock on his door and knock him out and go, "That's not funny."
Actually,
that might be my favorite old school Family Guy cutaway.
My favorite one was when Peter said he snuck into. Well, it's two ones actually revolving around Peter. One is when he snuck into a movie theater, by being a potted plant.
Mm.
And the other one is the dad's having an implant with a thermostat.
Oh yeah, the I don't think that's a cutaway though. I think that actually happened in the show's actual continuity. Same thing with the.
I know it's not a cutaway, but it's just a good bit of comedy.
Right. I think my favorite version of those was the one where Stewie and Brian are sleeping in a cheap motel and mobsters. Yeah. For God's sake, there's only one way to put an end to this nuisance. He's wearing a wire. What?
You son of a bitch.
Yeah, Stewie just quietly goes back to sleep, knowing full well that bullets are literally flying over their heads.
Yeah.
Back when Stewie was actually an evil genius and not regressing to being a baby who spontaneously can talk for no reason. They used to actually write Stewie with a decent vocabulary, and they just don't bother to anymore, and it annoys me.
Again, I feel like that's just because obviously
it's seasonal. It's seasonal rot. It is, but I like Stewie when he was an evil genius.
Yeah,
that may or may not be because I can sometimes find that exceedingly relatable. Shush.
All right. Anyway, let me rewind it back just so we have them. Again, I'm shocked by that whole thing.
Yeah, again, I don't think I've ever seen a trailer one up us in real time like that. Holy fuck.
Yeah.
The new version.
That's the sound of the police.
Hi, Daddy. It's me, Frank Jr. Love you.
Hey, Dad. Boy, do I miss you.
Okay, no, he's not. Oh, okay, never mind.
Okay, I might actually really enjoy this now.
I'm sorry. Just the gag of everyone, the Hall of Legends and all their kids, or just.
Okay, trailer, you get 1 point.
Also, I don't know if you knew this, but O.J. Simpson was a part of this series. He played a character called Nordberg. They're about to do a gag with.
I hope they do. I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but Fuck O.J. Simpson, honestly.
It's his kid who's also a cop, but isn't like crying or anything at his photo. My God.
Turns out the character OJ played was one of the dirty cops and was secretly the villain all along or something. Would probably be the way they do that.
I'm gonna say this. He actually had some pretty comedic timing in those movies. He was actually pretty funny in those.
Yeah, I don't like O.J. Simpson is not like lacking in charisma. He just was also an evil bitch, apparently.
Yeah.
Being good at being an artist is not the same as being a moral person, folks.
It's coming out in August 1st.
Okay. Fun.
So we're only getting.
Yeah, I think this might be one of the few movies I'm actually looking forward to. The other one being Sinners, because Sinners looks like it might be right up my alley, as long as they don't hyper focus on the race thing again. I know a lot of movies do that now, but hopefully it won't.
I think it's coming out this month, right? Like Sinners.
Yeah, like 2 days before Easter, the Friday before Easter, Good Friday.
Weird that isn't closer to October.
I don't know why studios don't think these things through when they're picking release dates.
Like, it's a horror movie, right? Like,
somewhere between a horror movie and one of those like urban fantasy noir type things that I like so much. I think
I was gonna say like a classic gangsters movie because it's set in like early 1900s Deep South, Prohibition, I believe. So,
and we've seen in the trailers there's actual like magic involved, because there's that one scene where he like sets a guy on fire or whatever.
I think that was just a vampire in the sun.
That's as maybe, but it does look like a movie that's right up my alley, as long as they don't weigh it down with too much commentary. It's
Right.
Isn't it Jordan Peele that's making it, or is it Ryan Coogler that's making it?
Ryan Coogler.
Okay, so I'm less worried now. I thought for a second it was Jordan Peele, and Jordan Peele can't resist putting the commentary allegories in there. But Ryan Coogler at least seems better at weaving them into the story organically rather than beating the audience over the head with a brick.
Anyway, with that, folks, want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, avideze, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Shalom and fuck off.